Hello everyone, welcome back. My name's Jase. This channel's about our journey to become more self-sufficient, and today's video is all about cold frames. In fact, I'm going to make a cold frame from these old cabinet doors that I've got, and I'm going to show you how I do it. Now, with the advent of cheaper polytunnels and greenhouses, cold frames aren't as common as they used to be. But if you were to go back 30, 40, 50 years, nearly every garden and allotment would have cold frames for bringing on young plants. So a cold frame is basically a mini greenhouse or a cloche, and it's normally a low-level box made out of wood or brick with a sloping glass or perspex roof. Sometimes they're polycarbonate, and you can actually buy cold frames with full glass sides, and you can buy ones with polythene covers. But if you've got some old windows, then you can easily make your own. Now, whether you choose to buy one or make your own, a well-positioned south-facing cold frame is a very useful tool to the gardener. That said, if you're in the southern hemisphere, face it north. And cold frames are brilliant for hardening off young plants in the early part of the year, which is what I want to use this one for when I've made it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these windows up to the house where I've got a room that we're renovating which isn't finished yet, where I've got space and it's dry. It's quite damp out here today and quite cold. So I'm going to make the frame up there, and then when it's built we'll bring it down. Now I'm going to put the frame on this old workbench, and that's the other thing with cold frames. They're the perfect environment for slugs. They're warm, they're humid, and you're putting in their meal every day in the way of young plants. So if you are going to build a cold frame, consider putting it up on legs or on some bricks, anything to get it off the ground. Make it as hard as possible for those slugs to get in there and eat your young plants. Now, if you're going to make your cold frame from wood, then obviously marine ply or a treated timber would be the best option, because it's going to be more weatherproof. However, I'm on a budget. I do have this scrap wood left from the renovation, so I'm going to use that and try and weatherproof it the best I can with some waterproof paint. I accept that it may only last a few years, and that's okay. I can rebuild it with some more suitable material at that point. But the process of building it is exactly the same, no matter what materials you were going to use. So I'm going to make the frame out of some 2x2 timber. The base will be some OSB board, which is water resistant, let's call it that. At least on the surface, the edges are more prone to absorbing moisture. And I'm going to use some 10mm shuttering ply. So they're the materials I'm going to use, and we'll go through it step by step. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to use 10mm ply, and I'm going to use that for the ends of the cold frame, the bits that slope, and I'm going to use it for the back and the front. And I'm going to use the factory corner, the edge of the board that came out of the factory, because I know that's going to be 90 degrees So wherever possible, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use a factory edge to measure from. Now, with cold frames, depending where you live, really is going to dictate the slope of the window on the top. And that's because in the winter, the sun is lower in the sky than it is in the summer. And it can make a big difference to how much sunlight you get into the cold frame. If you make the window too steep and the sun's high in the sky, then there's a chance that you could be shading the plants from above. Equally, if you put the window at too shallow an angle and the sun is low in the sky, again the plants are going to be shaded from the front. So I found this website which is really useful, and you can type in your area and it will give you the angles of the sun at different times of the year. And where you live makes a difference as well. The further north, in the UK I'm talking about, then the lower the sun is going to be in the sky because you're further from the equator. So I've worked out that for my cold frame the best angle is going to be 35 degrees, and that's based on the months of, say, the end of February through to the beginning of May maximum. They're the months I would be using it for hardening off various different crops. So I'm going to use this corner. Now I want to have a front of about 6 inches on my cold frame, and that's so that it's low enough that it isn't shading the plants too much when the sun's low, but equally there's enough space for some plants to grow without touching the glass. So I'm going to measure 6 inches up plus 2 inches for the depth of the timber that I'm going to use as the frame. So 8 inches in total. I'll mark the 2 as well, just so I know where the frame is going to come to. And then I'm going to, using my roofing square, mark 35 degrees from that point. So 35 will be there. Now, if you don't have a roofing square or something similar, you've only got a 90 degree set square, mark your height of the front plus your frame, draw your line that indicates 0 degrees, and then divide this angle, so you've got 90 degrees here, and then take a best guess which is halfway. So that would then be 45 degrees, and then you could divide that angle again, which will give you 22.5 degrees. So somewhere between there and there will give you your 35. You can do it roughly, it doesn't have to be exact, but getting it somewhere near will make the cold frame more effective. So now I've got the height of my front marked, I've got my 35 degree mark here. What I want to do is take one of the windows, place it in line with the top of the front, my 35 degree mark, and draw a line the length of the window. And the reason I'm doing that is this window, the measurement of this window is going to dictate all further measurements throughout the frame. The width of the window and the angle that I want to put it at, they are the governing factors. I can't change them. So that's now the length of the window at the slope that I want it. What I'm going to do then is draw a line so that I'm parallel with the factory edge of the board, like so. And what I want is that to be 2 inches. And this is going to be a flat area at the top of the frame that I can screw the hinges of the windows to. So I know that my frame is going to be made from 2-inch timber, so I'm going to mark that off at 2 inches. All I need to do then is draw my line from here to here, making sure I'm 90 degrees to the factory edge of the board, and that is the shape of one of my end panels. So I'll do that, get it cut and show you what it looks like. So when you've got one end cut, give it a quick sand on the edges, because when you cut timber you always open up the pores in the wood, and that's where moisture is more likely to get in and start to cause you problems. So by sanding you close the pores a little bit and make it a bit harder for moisture to get in there. So now I've got my 2 ends cut and sanded. I need to measure the doors, the length of the doors, because my plan is to have the doors lengthways next to each other, so it's going to be a long, thin frame to fit on top of that bench that I've got. So I need to make sure that both the doors are the same and allow for a small gap between the doors as well, because I don't want them catching each other as you try to open one or the other. And when I've got those measurements, then I'll start cutting the 2x2 to make a base frame for it all to get screwed together. So this is the basis of the frame. The ends will get screwed to the batten on the ends, each end, and then the OSB board will be screwed down onto the top of this frame, and that's why we allowed the extra 2 inches on the height of the frame, so that it gets screwed to this frame at the base. And I need to cut another piece to go in the centre there, just to give it some bracing, and because the OSB board that I've got isn't long enough to span the entire length, I'm going to have to put 2 pieces in. So I'll put a brace in the middle and then I'll cut the board to suit. So there'll be 2 bits in there. And then we can get it all screwed together. So I've got my middle piece cut. It's not in position yet, but I'm going to screw the end battens on. And to do that, the first thing I need to do is drill some pilot holes through, or some clearance holes through the end battens, because if I try to drive a screw through this piece of wood and into that piece of wood, it's just not going to work. So drill a hole in these all the way through, and then I'm going to use some glue, and this glue is a waterproof wood glue. It's called D4 wood adhesive. You can get it in most builders' yards, places like that. It's very good. It's quite dear for what it, as far as wood glues go, but it is a very good glue. and I haven't got a lot left, so I've cut the top off so I can get a screwdriver in there and get what's left. Must be a knot in that piece. That was really tough. Okay. This glue's quite lumpy because it's been in the shed and the cold has made it go a bit lumpy. When it comes to assembling things like this, using glue is a really good idea, a proper wood glue. A well glued joint is actually stronger than the wood itself, and if you glue two pieces of wood together, clamp them until the glue's set, you'll have to break the wood to get that joint apart. So really all the screws are going to do is hold these in place until it sets. These screws are 100mm, 5mm screws, and I'm using those because I've got them, but they're also a decent sized screw for the job. I'm screwing through 50mm timber, 2-inch, and I'm also screwing into the end grain of these pieces, so it's easier to drive a longer screw into the end grain. So I'll repeat that process now at the other end, and I will get that batten in the middle centred and screwed in, and then we'll measure and cut the base. So now I've cut the OSB board to width to suit that distance across the frame. I just need to cut the two pieces to length so that they go from the very ends of the frame to the centre point, so they share this centre batten. And then we'll be putting these on. Before I screw these panels onto the lower frame, I'm going to paint the top of this frame with a bitumen based waterproof paint, the sort of thing you would paint a shed roof with, or brickwork, that sort of thing. And this isn't going to be in contact with the plants or the soil, so I'm happy to use it as a waterproof medium and also act as a bit of a glue to stick the OSB board to the frame. So I'm only going to paint the outside of the cold frame with this paint. The inside I will paint with like a fence stroke shed paint that isn't toxic. So I'm going to put this on, and then we're going to get the OSB board screwed down. And it's important to get it into all the little knots, nooks and crannies of the wood. So now I've got the baseboard screwed to the base frame with waterproof paint in between. I want to screw the end panels to each end of the base, and before I do it I'm going to paint the frame on the ends with this stuff, making sure I get it into that cut edge of the OSB board, because that really is where moisture will get in and cause problems. So that's got the end screwed on, guys. I think what I'm going to do now is paint all of the underside and the edges, front and back, get it all painted up properly, and then leave it to dry overnight, and then tomorrow I will cut the front and the back and make a frame for the centrepiece, because again I'm going to have to join two bits of wood together in the centre, and they can then get put on. The paint should be dry by then, and we'll be getting towards the end then, get the windows fitted and ready to use.